Welcome to Volume and Vision, where timeless ideas become practical wisdom you can apply to everyday life. Imagine someone handing you an extra 2 hours every single day. What would you do with them? Maybe you'd finally start that business you've been dreaming about. Maybe you'd learn a new skill, spend more time with your family, exercise regularly, read more books, or simply enjoy life without feeling rushed. 2 extra hours every day would completely transform your future. Now here's the surprising part. Those 2 hours might already exist. They're simply hidden inside the countless moments that quietly disappear without us noticing. Think about yesterday. Not the major events, but the tiny moments in between. You unlocked your phone just to reply to one message. A notification appeared, then another. You watched one short video, checked a headline, scrolled through a few posts, answered an email, and before you knew it, 30 minutes had disappeared. Later, you sat down to begin an important task, but another notification interrupted your concentration. By the evening, you felt exhausted, even though you couldn't clearly explain what you had actually accomplished. If that sounds familiar, you're far from alone. Millions of people wake up with good intentions. They promise themselves that today will be different. Today they'll focus. Today they'll finally work on what matters. But somehow, every day ends in almost exactly the same way: busy, tired, and wondering where all the time went. Most people believe the solution is better time management. They buy planners, download productivity apps, organize colorful calendars, and search for the perfect morning routine. For a few days, everything feels under control. Then life becomes chaotic again, and the same cycle repeats. But what if the real problem has never been time? What if the real problem is where our attention goes? Time and attention are deeply connected. Every minute of your life is shaped by whatever has your attention in that moment. Wherever your attention goes, your life follows. If your attention constantly jumps from one distraction to another, your days begin to feel fragmented. Hours pass, but nothing truly meaningful gets done. On the other hand, when your attention is directed towards something important, even a single focused hour can create remarkable progress. That's the central idea behind Make Time. The book doesn't ask you to squeeze more tasks into your day. It doesn't encourage you to become a productivity machine or fill every empty minute with work. Instead, it challenges a belief that has quietly shaped modern life, the belief that being busy automatically means you're living well. Take a moment to think about someone you admire. It could be an entrepreneur, an artist, a scientist, a teacher, or someone in your own family. Chances are, what impresses you isn't how many emails they answered or how many meetings they attended. What you admire is the meaningful work they created, the relationships they built, the impact they made, or the peace with which they lived. Those achievements didn't happen because they were constantly busy. They happened because they consistently protected time for what mattered most. Unfortunately, today's world makes that increasingly difficult. Every company wants your attention. Every app is competing to keep you engaged. Every notification promises something urgent. The internet never reaches the end. There is always another article to read, another video to watch, another opinion to argue with, another update to check. Unlike a newspaper, which eventually has a final page, or a television show, which eventually ends, today's digital world is designed without a finish line. You can keep scrolling for hours, without ever reaching the bottom. The content never stops because stopping isn't the goal. The goal is to keep you engaged for as long as possible. This creates a dangerous illusion. We tell ourselves, just 5 more minutes. But 5 minutes become 20. 20 becomes an hour. An hour becomes another evening that quietly slips away. The problem isn't that technology is evil. Smartphones, computers, and the internet are extraordinary tools. They allow us to learn almost anything, communicate instantly across continents, and accomplish tasks that once took days in just a few minutes. The challenge begins when these tools stop serving us and we begin serving them. Without realizing it, many of us have developed habits that run automatically. We wake up and immediately reach for our phones. We check notifications before we've even fully opened our eyes. During breakfast, we scroll through headlines. While working, we interrupt ourselves every few minutes to check messages. Even during moments of rest, we instinctively search for another screen to occupy our minds. After repeating these patterns hundreds of times, they no longer feel like choices. They feel normal. But normal doesn't always mean healthy. Imagine a person trying to read a novel while someone interrupts them every 2 minutes. First, they're asked to answer a question. Then they're shown a funny video. Next comes a text message. A few moments later, another notification appears. Even if every interruption lasts only a few seconds, by the end of an hour they may have read only a handful of pages. Now replace the novel with your dreams. Replace those interruptions with the countless distractions that fill modern life. It's no surprise that so many people feel they're making less progress than they hoped. The encouraging news is that you don't need extraordinary discipline to change this. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to escape society or throw away every piece of technology you own. Sometimes, the biggest improvements begin with one simple decision. Choosing, in advance, what deserves your best attention today. That single choice may sound small, but over weeks, months, and years, it can completely reshape the direction of your life. The remarkable thing about our lives is that they aren't shaped by a handful of dramatic decisions. They're shaped by the small choices we repeat every single day. A single workout won't transform your health. Reading one chapter won't make you an expert. Saving a few dollars once won't make you wealthy. But when those actions are repeated consistently, they create extraordinary results. Time works the same way. Most people wait for a free weekend, a vacation, or the perfect moment to begin working on something meaningful. They tell themselves, "I'll start when life becomes less busy." But if you've been saying that for months, or even years, you've probably noticed something important. Life rarely becomes less busy on its own. There will always be another deadline, another responsibility, another invitation, another message waiting for your attention. If you keep waiting for your schedule to magically clear itself, you may end up waiting forever. This is why the authors encourage a completely different mindset. Instead of asking, "When will I have time?" ask yourself, "What deserves my time today?" That simple shift changes everything. Imagine you have a large glass jar on your table. Beside it are several large rocks, a pile of small pebbles, and a bucket of sand. If you begin by pouring the sand into the jar, followed by the pebbles, you'll quickly discover that the large rocks no longer fit. But if you place the large rocks in first, the pebbles naturally settle into the empty spaces. And the sand fills whatever room remains. Your day works exactly the same way. The large rocks represent the activities that truly move your life forward. They might be writing a chapter of your book, practicing a musical instrument, preparing for an important exam, spending uninterrupted time with your family, or exercising to improve your health. These are the things that matter not just today, but months and years from now. The pebbles are the necessary responsibilities of daily life. Grocery shopping, answering important emails, attending meetings, paying bills, or completing household chores. They're important, but they shouldn't consume every ounce of your attention. Then there's the sand, the endless scrolling, the unnecessary arguments online, checking your phone every few minutes without a reason, watching videos simply because another one automatically started playing. Individually, these activities seem harmless. Together, they quietly fill every empty space in your day. And when the jar is already full of sand, there's no room left for the things that actually matter. One of the most powerful ideas in Make Time is the concept of choosing a single daily highlight. Notice that the authors don't suggest creating a list of 10 priorities. They don't recommend trying to master every area of your life simultaneously. Instead, they ask you to identify one meaningful activity that, if completed, would make you look back on the day with satisfaction. Why only one? Because our brains are far better at protecting one important commitment than trying to juggle 20 competing priorities. Think about the difference between saying, "Today I need to finish everything," and saying, "Today, no matter what happens, I'm going to complete this one important task." The first statement creates pressure. The second creates clarity. Clarity reduces decision fatigue. Instead of constantly wondering what to work on next, you've already made the decision before your day even begins. That doesn't mean you'll ignore every other responsibility. It simply means you've identified the one activity that deserves your best energy. This idea becomes even more valuable when you realize that meaningful work rarely happens by accident. Have you ever noticed that your most important tasks are often the easiest to postpone? Not because they're difficult, but because they're significant. Writing the first page of a intimidating. Learning a new language requires patience. Starting a fitness routine demands consistency. Building a business involves uncertainty. Because these goals matter deeply, we naturally hesitate. Our minds search for easier alternatives. Cleaning the room suddenly feels urgent. Checking emails seems productive. Organizing files appears useful. Without realizing it, we replace meaningful progress with comfortable busyness. At the end of the day, we've been active from morning until night, yet the goal we cared about most remains untouched. This is where the daily highlight becomes a powerful anchor. Instead of allowing your attention to drift toward whatever seems most urgent, you intentionally return to the commitment you made to yourself. Some days your highlight might be professional. Other days it could be deeply personal. Maybe it's attending your child's school performance without checking your phone once. Maybe it's spending 90 minutes preparing for an important examination. Maybe it's taking your parents out for dinner after months of postponing it. Or perhaps it's finally beginning the creative project you've imagined for years but never found time to start. The specific activity isn't what matters most. What matters is that you've consciously decided it deserves a place in your day before distractions begin competing for your attention. This approach also changes how we measure success. Many people evaluate their day by asking, "How much did I get done?" But that's not always the right question. Imagine spending 12 hours completing dozens of tiny, unimportant tasks while completely ignoring the one thing that could have moved your life forward. Would that really be a successful day? Now imagine another day where you completed only a handful of responsibilities, but you also spent 90 uninterrupted minutes making meaningful progress towards something you deeply care about. Most people would remember the second day with far greater satisfaction. Productivity isn't measured by how much movement there is. It's measured by whether your movement is taking you in the right direction. A rocking chair moves constantly, yet it never travels anywhere. Many of us live the same way. We stay in motion from sunrise to sunset, but months later we realize we're standing in exactly the same place. The goal isn't simply to stay busy. The goal is to make every important hour count. And that begins with a surprisingly simple habit: deciding, before the noise of the day begins, what is truly worth protecting. The challenge, however, isn't choosing what matters. The real challenge is protecting it. Think about how often you've started an important task with complete confidence. You clear your desk, open your laptop, gather everything you need, and tell yourself, "This is it. I'm finally going to focus." 5 minutes later, your phone vibrates. You tell yourself you'll check it for just a second. One notification becomes 3. A message reminds you of an email. The email contains a link. The link leads to another article. Before you realize what's happened, your concentration has disappeared, and your mind has shifted miles away from where it began. This experience is so common that many people assume it's simply part of modern life. But here's something fascinating about the human brain. Focus isn't something that switches on and off like a light. It's something that gradually builds. Imagine pushing a heavy train. At first, every inch requires tremendous effort. The train barely moves. But once it gains momentum, each push becomes easier because the train is already rolling in the right direction. Deep concentration works in exactly the same way. The first few minutes often feel uncomfortable. Your mind wants stimulation. It remembers unfinished conversations, random questions, tomorrow's plans, and dozens of unrelated thoughts. If you stay with the task, however, something remarkable begins to happen. Your attention settles. Ideas become clearer. Connections appear naturally. Problems that seemed impossible begin to make sense. This mental state is often called flow, that rare experience where time seems to disappear because you're completely immersed in what you're doing. Ironically, this is also the state we interrupt most often. Every unnecessary distraction forces the brain to start the process all over again. Imagine reading an exciting mystery novel, but after every 2 pages someone closes the book, asks you a random question, and waits several minutes before giving it back. You would eventually finish the story, but it would require far more effort than reading it uninterrupted. Our workdays often look exactly like that. We're constantly restarting our attention. Each interruption may last only a few seconds, but the hidden cost is much larger. The brain needs time to remember where it left off, rebuild its train of thought, and regain the same level of concentration. That's why an hour filled with interruptions rarely produces the same results as 30 minutes of uninterrupted focus. The lesson here isn't that every notification is bad. Some messages are genuinely important. Emergencies happen. Certain responsibilities require immediate attention. The problem begins when everything feels equally urgent. Modern technology has conditioned us to react instantly. A notification appears, and we respond. An email arrives, and we open it. A message pops up, and we feel compelled to answer immediately. Over time, this creates an invisible habit. Instead of deciding where our attention goes, we allow every outside signal to decide for us. Imagine trying to have a meaningful conversation while a different person walks into the room every minute, asking you a new question. Eventually, neither conversation would have your full attention. That's exactly what happens inside our minds when we're constantly interrupted. The authors encourage us to become proactive rather than reactive. At first glance, those words sound similar, but they describe two completely different ways of living. A reactive day is controlled by whatever happens around you. You wake up and immediately check your phone because there might be something important waiting. You answer emails as soon as they arrive. You switch tasks whenever someone requests your attention. By evening, you've solved dozens of other people's problems, but your own priorities remain untouched. A proactive day begins differently. Instead of asking, "What does everyone else want from me?" you begin by asking, "What matters most today?" That single question quietly changes every decision that follows. It doesn't mean you'll ignore your responsibilities. It means you'll stop allowing them to dictate every moment of your life. One practical way to do this is by creating small barriers between yourself and your biggest distractions. Notice the word small. Many people believe self-control is about relying on willpower alone. They assume they'll simply resist temptation through determination. But willpower is a limited resource. Think about the last time you walked past a bakery while feeling hungry. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. You told yourself you wouldn't go inside. Maybe you succeeded once, maybe twice, but if you repeated that situation every day, resisting would become more difficult. Now imagine taking a different route that doesn't pass the bakery at all. Suddenly, there's nothing to resist. The temptation never appears. This is the power of designing your environment. Instead of fighting distractions every minute, remove as many unnecessary temptations as possible before they ever demand your attention. Place your phone in another room while you work. Turn off notifications that don't genuinely matter. Close the extra browser tabs you aren't using. Keep only the materials you need for your current task within reach. These changes seem almost too simple. Yet simplicity is exactly why they work. Every distraction you eliminate before beginning your work is one less decision your brain has to make later. And those saved decisions preserve your mental energy for the work that truly deserves it. There's another important reason this strategy is effective. Our environment quietly shapes our behavior far more than we realize. Walk into a quiet library, and your voice automatically becomes softer. Enter a crowded stadium, and suddenly everyone around you is shouting. The environment changes your actions without requiring conscious effort. So instead of constantly trying to become a more disciplined person, ask a different question. Can I create an environment where the right choice becomes the easiest choice? That might mean leaving your phone outside the room while studying. It might mean placing a book on your bedside table instead of your tablet. It might mean preparing tomorrow's workspace before going to sleep so that starting feels effortless the next morning. Success often depends less on extraordinary motivation and more on thoughtful preparation. The people who appear incredibly disciplined are often the ones who've simply made distraction less convenient and focus far more accessible. Because when your surroundings support your goals instead of competing against them, making time for what truly matters becomes far easier than you ever imagined. The interesting thing is that most people don't lose control of their day because of one major mistake. They lose it through dozens of tiny decisions that seem completely harmless on their own. You tell yourself you'll check one notification before starting work. Then you decide to refill your coffee first. On the way back, you remember another small task that will only take 2 minutes. A friend sends a message, and replying feels polite. Someone shares an interesting article that you promise yourself you'll read quickly. None of these choices seem important enough to worry about. Yet when they accumulate, They quietly consume the hours that were meant for your most meaningful work. This is why Make Time encourages us to think differently. Instead of treating focus as something that magically appears when we're motivated, the authors suggest treating it as something we deliberately protect. Imagine a professional athlete preparing for a championship. The day before the competition, they don't stay up late watching random videos. They don't skip meals. They don't fill their schedule with unnecessary commitments. Every decision is made with one purpose in mind: performing at their best when it matters most. Now ask yourself a simple question. If you had something truly important to accomplish tomorrow, how differently would you prepare today? You would probably go to bed earlier. You would avoid unnecessary stress. You might organize your workspace in advance. You would make sure everything you needed was ready before you began. So why don't we prepare every important day in the same way? The truth is, many of our biggest goals never receive the respect they deserve. We treat them as optional. We assume we'll find time whenever life becomes less demanding. But meaningful work deserves preparation. It deserves protection. And above all, it deserves a place in your schedule before everything else begins competing for your attention. One of the most practical lessons from this book is that you shouldn't rely on memory to remember what's important. Our minds are wonderful for creating ideas, but they're surprisingly poor at storing them. Have you ever had a brilliant thought while walking, driving, or taking a shower, only to completely forget it an hour later? It happens because the brain is constantly processing new information. Every conversation, every sound, every notification pushes older thoughts into the background. Instead of trying to remember everything, successful people develop systems that remember for them. Keep a notebook nearby. Use a simple notes app. Carry a small journal. Whenever an idea appears, write it down immediately. This habit accomplishes two things. First, it prevents valuable ideas from disappearing. Second, and perhaps even more importantly, it allows your mind to relax. When your brain knows that an idea has been safely captured, it no longer has to keep repeating it to make sure you don't forget. That frees up mental space for deeper thinking. Think of your brain like a computer. If dozens of unnecessary programs are running in the background, even a powerful computer begins to slow down. Closing those background programs instantly improves performance. Your mind works in much the same way. Every unfinished task, every forgotten reminder, every unmade decision quietly occupies a small amount of mental energy. Psychologists sometimes call this the Zeigarnik effect, our tendency to keep thinking about unfinished tasks. Even when we're trying to concentrate on something completely different, our brains continue reminding us of things we've left incomplete. Have you ever sat down to study, only to suddenly remember that you needed to pay a bill, return a phone call, or buy groceries? Those thoughts aren't appearing because they're urgent. They're appearing because your brain is trying to protect you from forgetting. The solution isn't to force yourself to stop thinking about them. The solution is to capture them somewhere trustworthy so your mind no longer has to carry them. That's why many highly productive people don't necessarily have better memories. They simply have better systems. Another fascinating idea in Make Time is that not every hour of the day is equal. Many people assume that if they work for 8 hours, every hour will produce roughly the same quality of work. Reality tells a different story. Think back to a day when you woke up feeling refreshed after a great night's sleep. You probably solved problems more quickly. Learning felt easier. Conversations flowed naturally. Decisions required less effort. Now compare that with a day after very little sleep. Simple tasks suddenly felt frustrating. You reread the same paragraph multiple times without understanding it. Small inconveniences seemed much larger than they really were. The amount of time available hadn't changed. But your ability to use that time had. That's an important distinction. The goal isn't just to create more free hours. It's to make sure your best hours are spent on your most important work. Many people unknowingly reverse this pattern. They spend their freshest, most energetic hours checking emails, attending routine meetings, or scrolling through information that could easily wait until later. Then, when it's finally time to work on something meaningful, they're mentally exhausted. Imagine asking a marathon runner to sprint the final mile after they've already spent hours running in circles. Technically, they're still moving, but their best energy has already been used elsewhere. Your mental energy deserves the same protection. Pay attention to the times of day when your thinking feels sharpest. For some people, that's early in the morning. Others feel most creative late at night. There's no universal schedule that works for everyone. The important thing is recognizing your own rhythm instead of blindly following someone else's. Once you discover when your mind performs at its best, guard those hours carefully. Don't waste them on routine tasks that require very little thinking. Reserve them for creating, solving, learning, writing, building, or making progress on the work that will still matter years from now. Because the most valuable hours of your day aren't defined by the clock. They're defined by the quality of your attention. And when you learn to protect both your attention and your energy, you'll begin to notice something remarkable. The days no longer feel like they're slipping away. Instead, they begin to feel intentional. Each evening, you'll know exactly where your time went, not because you were busy every minute, but because you invested your best moments in the things that genuinely deserved them. There's another mistake that quietly steals our time, and unlike notifications or social media, it's much harder to notice because it feels responsible. It's the habit of saying yes to everything. Most of us don't like disappointing people. We want to be helpful. We want to be seen as reliable. So when someone asks for a favor, invites us to another meeting, or requests our help on a project, our first instinct is often to agree. At first, it seems harmless. After all, helping others is a good thing. The problem begins when every yes to someone else's priorities becomes a silent no to your own. Imagine your day as a budget. Just as you have a limited amount of money to spend, you also have a limited amount of attention, energy, and time. If you spend your entire budget on small purchases, you may have nothing left for the investment that could have changed your future. Time works exactly the same way. Every commitment costs something. Some commitments give you knowledge. Some strengthen relationships. Some help your career, but others simply fill your calendar without adding much value. The difficult part is that these low-value commitments rarely look unimportant when they first appear. They often arrive disguised as opportunities. Can you help with this for a few minutes? Would you mind joining one more meeting? Could you quickly review this? Each request seems reasonable in isolation. Yet dozens of reasonable requests can easily become an unreasonable life. That's why one of the most valuable skills you can develop isn't working faster. It's choosing more carefully. Successful people are often admired for what they accomplish, but just as important is what they deliberately choose not to do. They understand that protecting their time isn't selfish. It's necessary. Imagine a gardener who plants hundreds of different seeds in one tiny patch of land. Every plant competes for sunlight, water, and nutrients. Eventually, none of them grow to their full potential. Now imagine another gardener who plants only a handful of carefully chosen seeds and gives each one the space and care it needs. Months later, which garden is more likely to flourish? Your goals are no different. When every objective receives only a tiny fraction of your attention, none of them receive enough care to truly grow. This doesn't mean your life should become rigid or inflexible. Unexpected opportunities are part of life. Emergencies happen, plans change, but there is an enormous difference between adjusting your priorities intentionally and allowing every new request to completely rearrange your day. Learning to pause before saying yes creates space for better decisions. Instead of responding immediately, ask yourself a few simple questions. Does this align with what's most important to me? Will saying yes today make tomorrow more difficult? Am I accepting this because it truly matters, or simply because I feel uncomfortable saying no? These questions may seem small, but they reveal something powerful. Every decision shapes the person you're becoming. If you repeatedly choose activities that move you closer to your long-term goals, your future begins to take shape almost automatically. If you repeatedly choose whatever happens to appear in front of you, your future slowly becomes a collection of other people's priorities. This brings us to another lesson that many people overlook. Focus is not just about eliminating distractions. It's also about eliminating unnecessary decisions. Think about how many choices you make before noon. What should I wear? What should I eat? Should I check my email now or later? Which task should I begin first? Should I answer this message immediately? Every decision consumes a tiny amount of mental energy. By the afternoon, your brain may feel tired even if you've done very little meaningful work. This is why many highly effective people simplify the parts of life that don't require creativity. Some prepare tomorrow's clothes the night before. Others plan meals in advance. Some schedule specific times for checking email instead of reacting throughout. These habits aren't about becoming robotic. They're about preserving your decision-making ability for the moments that truly matter. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with small stones. One stone isn't heavy, neither are 5, but after adding 50 or 60, even walking becomes exhausting. Tiny decisions accumulate in exactly the same way. Reducing them doesn't just save time. It protects your mental clarity. The authors also emphasize that perfection is one of the greatest enemies of action. Many people postpone meaningful work because they're waiting for the perfect conditions. The perfect morning, the perfect idea, the perfect workspace, the perfect amount of free time. But perfection has an interesting habit. It never arrives. A writer doesn't become better by waiting for inspiration. A musician doesn't improve by imagining flawless performances. An entrepreneur doesn't build a successful business by endlessly refining plans without taking action. Progress begins with imperfect action. The first draft will never be your best. Your first workout may feel uncomfortable. Your first presentation might not be flawless. Your first attempt at learning a language will include mistakes. And that's exactly how it's supposed to be. Mastery is built through repetition, not perfection. Think about how children learn to walk. They don't study balance for months before taking their first step. They stumble, they fall, they get back up. Every mistake teaches them something. Eventually, what once seemed impossible becomes completely natural. Adults often forget this lesson. We become so afraid of making mistakes that we stop trying altogether. Ironically, avoiding failure often guarantees something much worse. Standing still. The people who accomplish extraordinary things aren't those who avoid mistakes. They're the ones who learn faster because they're willing to make them. Every imperfect attempt provides information. Every setback reveals what needs to change. Every challenge develops resilience that success alone could never teach. This is why Make Time isn't simply a book about calendars or schedules. It's a philosophy about living intentionally. It's about recognizing that your life is being shaped right now, not someday in the future, but today. By the conversation you choose to have. By the project you decide to begin. By the distraction you decide to ignore. By the person you choose to spend time with. And by the quiet promise you make to yourself that the things which matter most will no longer be pushed aside by the things that merely seem urgent. Because once you begin making those choices consistently, something remarkable happens. You stop feeling like you're chasing time. Instead, it starts to feel as though time is finally working with you instead of against you. There's one more resource that often goes unnoticed when people think about productivity. It's not time. It's not talent. It's energy. Imagine two people sitting at identical desks with the exact same amount of work to complete. Both have 3 hours available. One person slept well, ate a nutritious meal, took a short walk in the morning, and feels mentally refreshed. The other stayed awake until 2 in the morning, skipped breakfast, and has already consumed 3 cups of coffee just to stay awake. Technically, both people have the same amount of time. But do they have the same ability to use it? Of course not. This is why the authors argue that protecting your energy is just as important as protecting your schedule. Time determines how long you can work. Energy determines how well you can work. Most of us have experienced moments when 30 minutes of focused effort produced more results than 3 hours of distracted work. That difference wasn't created by the clock. It was created by the condition of the mind. Modern culture often glorifies exhaustion. People proudly say they only slept 4 hours, skipped lunch, and worked non-stop from morning until midnight, as if burning themselves out is proof of dedication. But exhaustion isn't an achievement. It's a warning sign. Imagine owning a high-performance sports car. You wouldn't expect it to perform well if you never refueled it, never changed the oil, and ignored every maintenance light on the dashboard. Eventually, even the most powerful machine would begin to fail. Your brain is no different. It needs fuel, it needs rest, it needs movement, and it needs recovery. Ignoring those needs doesn't make you more productive. It simply makes every task harder than it needs to be. One of the simplest ways to restore energy is through movement. Notice that the authors don't suggest training like an Olympic athlete or spending hours in the gym every day. Instead, they remind us that the human body was designed to move regularly. Think about how different your body feels after sitting in one position for 3 hours compared to taking a brisk 20-minute walk outside. Movement changes more than your muscles. It improves blood flow. It increases alertness. It reduces stress. It often provides the mental reset you need to solve problems that seemed impossible just moments earlier. Have you ever struggled with a difficult question for hours, only to find the answer while taking a shower or walking through a park? That isn't a coincidence. When you step away from intense concentration, your brain continues working quietly in the background. Sometimes the best ideas appear when you're no longer forcing them. That's why taking a break isn't always a delay. Sometimes it's part of the solution. Unfortunately, many people confuse rest with distraction. Scrolling endlessly through social media doesn't usually leave you feeling refreshed. Watching random videos for an hour rarely gives you more energy. Those activities occupy your attention, but they don't necessarily restore it. True recovery often looks surprisingly simple. A short walk, a conversation with someone you care about, reading a few pages of a good book, stretching your body, spending time outdoors, sitting quietly with your own thoughts for a few minutes. These activities may seem ordinary, yet they replenish the mental energy that constant stimulation quietly drains. Sleep is another area where people often try to negotiate with reality. Many believe they can sacrifice sleep today and somehow recover later. While the occasional late night is unavoidable, turning sleep deprivation into a lifestyle comes at a significant cost. Lack of sleep doesn't just make you tired. It weakens your attention. It slows your memory. It affects your mood. It reduces your creativity. Even your ability to make good decisions begins to decline. Ironically, the more exhausted we become, the more likely we are to choose activities that make us even less productive. We crave junk food instead of healthy meals. We choose easy entertainment instead of meaningful work. We postpone important decisions because they suddenly feel overwhelming. Fatigue doesn't simply reduce your energy. It quietly changes your behavior. This is one reason successful routines often begin the night before rather than the next morning. Going to bed at a reasonable time. Preparing tomorrow's workspace. Deciding your priorities before sleeping. These small evening habits remove unnecessary friction from the following day. When you wake up, you're not beginning with confusion. You're beginning with clarity. Food also plays a larger role than many people realize. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to concentrate after eating an unusually heavy meal? Or how irritable you become when you've gone too long without eating anything at all? Your brain consumes an incredible amount of energy throughout the day. It depends on consistent nourishment to perform at its best. This doesn't mean following complicated diets or chasing every new health trend. It simply means paying attention to how different foods affect your ability to think, focus, and maintain steady energy. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is awareness. Notice what helps you feel alert. Notice what leaves you feeling sluggish. Then make small adjustments rather than dramatic changes. Perhaps the most overlooked source of energy, however, comes from something that has nothing to do with food or exercise. It's the people around you. Think about someone whose company always leaves you feeling encouraged. After spending time with them, your mind feels lighter. Your motivation increases. Problems seem more manageable. Now think about someone who constantly complains, criticizes, or spreads negativity. After an hour with them, you may feel emotionally exhausted without understanding exactly why. Human beings absorb the emotional atmosphere around them. The conversations you have, the people you spend time with, and even the content you consume every day shape your mindset more than you realize. That's why protecting your energy sometimes means protecting your environment. Choose conversations that inspire growth. Spend time with people who challenge you to become better. Seek ideas that expand your perspective instead of constantly feeding fear or outrage. Every piece of information entering your mind either strengthens your focus or weakens it. Every habit either builds your energy or quietly drains it. And over time, these small choices accumulate into something much larger. They determine whether you wake up each morning excited to engage with your life, or simply hoping to survive another busy day. The beautiful thing about this process is that transformation rarely requires dramatic change. You don't need to reinvent your entire lifestyle overnight. You don't need a perfect routine. You don't need flawless discipline. You simply need to improve a little, consistently. Go to bed 30 minutes earlier. Take a walk after lunch. Drink more water. Read instead of scrolling before sleep. Protect one uninterrupted block of focus each day. None of these habits seem life-changing on their own. But remember, extraordinary lives are rarely built through extraordinary days. They're built through ordinary days lived with extraordinary intention. And when you begin taking care of your energy with the same seriousness that you protect your time, you'll discover something remarkable. The work that once felt exhausting begins to feel enjoyable. The goals that once seemed distant begin moving closer. And the life you wanted to create no longer feels like something waiting in the future. It begins taking shape, one intentional day at a time. If there's one lesson that ties everything together, it's this: your days don't become meaningful by accident. They become meaningful through intention. Think back to some of the most fulfilling days you've ever experienced. Maybe it was the day you completed a project that had challenged you for months. Maybe it was an unforgettable trip with your family. Perhaps it was the afternoon you lost yourself in a hobby you genuinely loved, forgetting to look at the clock because you were completely immersed in the moment. What made those days memorable? It probably wasn't because you answered more emails than usual. It wasn't because your inbox finally reached zero. And it certainly wasn't because you spent an extra hour scrolling through your phone. The days we remember are the ones in which we gave our full attention to something that truly mattered. That's an important distinction because many people spend years chasing efficiency without ever asking what they're becoming efficient at. Imagine someone who becomes incredibly skilled at climbing ladders. They practice every day. They climb faster than anyone else. They never miss a step. Then one day they reach the top and discover the ladder has been leaning against the wrong wall all along. Speed was never the problem. Direction was. The same thing can happen in our lives. We become experts at responding quickly, multitasking constantly, and staying endlessly busy. Yet every so often, life forces us to pause and ask an uncomfortable question. Am I moving toward the life I actually want? It's a question that doesn't have a simple answer. And perhaps that's why so many people avoid asking it. Busyness is comfortable because it creates the illusion of progress. Reflection is uncomfortable because it demands honesty. But honest reflection is where meaningful change begins. The authors recommend ending each day with a brief moment of review. Not to criticize yourself, not to count every mistake, but simply to become more aware. Ask yourself a few straightforward questions. What was today's highlight? Did I protect time for it? When did I feel most focused? What distracted me the most? What gave me energy? What drained it? What would I like to do differently tomorrow? Notice that none of these questions are about perfection. They're about learning. Imagine trying to improve at a sport without ever reviewing your performance. You'd keep repeating the same mistakes because you wouldn't recognize them. Life works exactly the same way. Small moments of reflection gradually reveal patterns that are otherwise invisible. Perhaps you notice that your concentration is strongest before lunch. Maybe you realize that checking social media first thing in the morning affects your mood for hours afterward. Perhaps certain meetings could have been short emails, or maybe you discover that your best ideas always arrive during a walk. These observations become incredibly valuable because they allow you to design tomorrow a little better than today. Improvement doesn't require dramatic transformation. It requires awareness followed by small adjustments. 1% better may not sound impressive, but imagine improving by just 1% every day for an entire year. Those tiny gains begin to multiply. The same principle works in reverse. Tiny negative habits also compound. Skipping one workout isn't life-changing. Neither is wasting one evening online. But when small choices become repeated habits, they quietly shape the direction of your future. That's why the authors focus so much on daily actions instead of distant goals. Goals are important because they give us direction. Habits are important because they determine whether we ever reach that direction. A person who dreams of writing a novel doesn't become an author because they have a dream. They become an author because they sit down and write consistently. Someone doesn't become physically healthy because they wish to be healthier. They become healthier through hundreds of ordinary decisions made over time. Success is rarely the result of one extraordinary moment. It's usually the result of ordinary moments repeated with consistency. There's another truth worth remembering. Life moves in seasons. Some seasons demand intense work. Others call for rest. Sometimes your highlight will be advancing your career. At another stage, Your highlight might simply be spending an uninterrupted evening with your children because you know they'll only be young once. There may be periods when learning a new skill becomes your priority. Later, taking care of your health might become the most meaningful investment you can make. Your highlight doesn't have to remain the same forever. In fact, it shouldn't. What matters is that you consciously choose it instead of allowing the world to choose it for you. One of the greatest freedoms you'll ever experience isn't having unlimited time. It's having the confidence to decide how you'll spend the time you do have. Because the truth is, none of us knows exactly how many days remain. That isn't meant to create fear. It's meant to create clarity. If your time is limited, and it is, then every day becomes incredibly valuable. Every morning is another opportunity to invest your attention wisely. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to be fully present. Every decision becomes a vote for the kind of person you're becoming. Imagine looking back on your life many years from now. Do you think you'll remember the endless notifications, the countless emails, the random videos you watched while trying to avoid boredom? Probably not. You'll remember the people you loved, the risks you took, the lessons you learned, the books you read, the places you explored, the skills you developed, the moments when you gave your complete attention to something that truly mattered. Those are the experiences that shape a meaningful life. Everything else is background noise. This is why make time isn't really about squeezing more tasks into a crowded schedule. It's about making sure your finite days reflect your deepest values. It's about replacing automatic living with intentional living, replacing reaction with choice, replacing distraction with presence, and replacing the constant feeling of being busy with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that your time was spent well. Because at the end of every day, the question isn't whether you were occupied. The real question is far simpler. Did you make time for what matters most? If the answer becomes yes, more often than no, you'll discover that success isn't measured only by achievements or productivity. It's measured by living each day with purpose, clarity, and the confidence that your attention is finally serving your life, instead of being borrowed by everything around you. Now, before we bring this journey to a close, there's one final idea from Make Time that deserves your attention because it changes the way you look at every single day. Many people believe that a meaningful life is built through massive achievements. They imagine that happiness arrives only after getting the dream job, buying the perfect house, earning a certain amount of money, or reaching a major milestone. But when you study people who genuinely enjoy their lives, you notice something different. They don't wait for extraordinary moments to feel fulfilled. They learn how to make ordinary days meaningful. Think about it for a moment. Your life isn't made up of a few unforgettable events. It's made up of thousands of ordinary mornings, afternoons, and evenings. If those ordinary days are filled with stress, distraction, and constant busyness, then even the biggest achievements will only provide temporary satisfaction. But if your ordinary days are intentional, balanced, and meaningful, then life itself becomes something you enjoy, not just the destination you're chasing. That's the hidden message behind everything we've discussed. The purpose of making time isn't to become more productive than everyone else. It's to become more present in your own life. Presence is becoming increasingly rare. How often do we sit with family while secretly checking our phones? How often do we listen to someone speak while mentally preparing our own reply? How often do we watch a beautiful sunset through a camera lens instead of simply experiencing it? Technology has made it easier than ever to connect with the entire world. Ironically, it's also made it easier to disconnect from the people sitting right beside us. Real attention has become one of the greatest gifts you can offer another person. When you're fully present during a conversation, you're silently saying, at this moment, nothing is more important than you. That kind of attention builds stronger friendships. It strengthens families. It improves leadership. It creates trust. And unlike expensive gifts or impressive achievements, it costs nothing except your willingness to be completely present. The same principle applies to your own dreams. Imagine working on something without constantly wondering how many likes it will receive or what other people will think. Imagine reading a book simply because you're curious. Imagine exercising because you enjoy taking care of your body rather than trying to impress strangers. Imagine creating art, writing, learning, building, or exploring because the process itself brings you joy. That is a different way of living. Instead of chasing external validation, you're guided by internal purpose. Ironically, people who work this way often achieve remarkable success, not because success was their only goal, but because they consistently focused on doing meaningful work. There's something worth remembering. Not every day will go according to plan. Some mornings you'll oversleep, unexpected meetings will appear, your child might become sick, traffic may delay you, important plans could change without warning. Life will always contain uncertainty. The goal isn't to control every minute. The goal is to adapt without losing sight of what matters most. Missing one focused session doesn't ruin your progress. One unhealthy meal doesn't destroy your health. One distracted afternoon doesn't erase months of good habits. Progress isn't about never making mistakes. It's about returning to the path every time you wander away. Think of an airplane flying across the ocean. Many people imagine it travels in a perfectly straight line from takeoff to landing. In reality, that's almost never the case. Winds constantly push it slightly off course. The aircraft's navigation system keeps making small adjustments, bringing it back toward its destination. Those tiny corrections continue throughout the entire journey. Our lives work exactly the same way. You don't need perfect discipline. You simply need the willingness to keep making small corrections whenever you drift away from your priorities. That's how meaningful change happens. Not through one dramatic decision, but through hundreds of gentle course corrections made over time. As you finish this book, don't make the mistake that so many readers make. Don't try to apply every single idea tomorrow morning. Trying to change everything at once usually leads to changing nothing at all. Instead, choose one idea that resonated with you the most. Maybe you'll decide to protect the first hour of your morning from distractions. Maybe you'll begin choosing one meaningful highlight every day. Perhaps you'll start leaving your phone outside your bedroom. Or maybe you'll simply spend more uninterrupted time with the people you love. Whatever you choose, make it small enough that you can actually sustain it. Consistency always beats intensity. A habit you maintain for years is infinitely more valuable than an ambitious routine you abandon after 3 days. Remember, this book isn't asking you to become someone different. It's inviting you to become more intentional about the person you're already capable of being. You already have enough hours in your day. The real question is whether those hours are serving your priorities or someone else's. Every sunrise quietly hands you 24 new hours. No one receives more. No one receives less. The difference lies in what we decide to do with them. Some people spend their days reacting to whatever demands their attention. Others pause, choose what matters most, and protect it with intention. Years later, those small daily choices become 2 completely different lives. So tomorrow morning, before the emails begin, before the notifications arrive, and before the world starts asking for your attention, ask yourself one simple question. If today could be remembered for just one meaningful thing, what would I want that to be? Then give that one thing your best attention. Protect it. Finish it. Be present while doing it. Because in the end, a meaningful life isn't built by finding more time. It's built by making better use of the time you already have. Thank you for spending these moments with Volume and Vision. If you found value in this book summary, consider subscribing to the channel and joining our community of lifelong learners. Every week, we break down some of the world's most influential books into practical ideas you can apply immediately, helping you grow wiser, think deeper, and live with greater purpose. Until our next journey together, keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep making time for what truly matters.